Blowout Barbie Julie Grant from Court TV wonders if the jury pool was tainted for season 2 of the Karen Retrial because she can't possibly fathom the fact that there were 12 highly intelligent people who came to the same conclusion that 99.9% of the human population have, that there was no evidence provided by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts proving that a collision ever occurred. But my question for you, Julie, is what on earth would you call this?
Trooper Proctor was not there and did not plant evidence at 34 Fairview Road. In addition to having no opportunity to plant the evidence, as has been suggested, Proctor would have no motive to do so. Trooper Proctor had no close personal relationship with any of the parties involved in the investigation and had no conflict. And he had no reason to step out of this investigation. Every suggestion to the contrary is a lie. This should be seen for what it is, and not used as a pretext to attack and harass others. What is happening to the witnesses, some with no actual involvement in the case, is wrong. It is contrary to the American values of fairness and the constitutional value of a fair trial.
I mean, with a statement like that, it's amazing that Karen Read ever stood a chance being persecuted and prosecuted fairly in Norfolk County to begin with. Hello, 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 and welcome back, roommates, to another titillating edition of Alexasrewm, where we are not lawyers, we are not medical professionals, and we are not law enforcement. We are just people. People who have a lot of opinions about all things going on in the post-verdict follow-up of Season 2 of the Karen Read trial, including special probiotic Hank Breenan breaking his silence nearly 1 week after Karen Read was freed. Let's see what kind of tone-deaf statement he made now. I am disappointed in the verdict and the fact that we could not achieve justice for John O'Keefe and his family. I think that was pretty much proven to be impossible, achieving justice for John O'Keefe when the investigation was completely botched and Canton police failed to properly secure the scene of the crime. District Attorney Meatball Morrissey appointed me, giving me full discretion to independently assess the case and follow the evidence no matter where it led. After an independent and thorough review of all the evidence, I concluded that the evidence led to one person, and only one person. Ooh, he loves the drama, doesn't he, folks? Neither the closed federal investigation, there it is again, more buzzwords, because he loves to announce and make it known that the federal investigation is closed, even though nobody really knows what, if anything, they were even investigating to begin with. But I digress. Nor my independent review led me to identify any other possible suspect or person responsible for the death of John O'Keefe. Well, according to now 24 jurors, none of them believed that Karen Read was responsible. So the one and only person that the evidence couldn't prove collided into John O'Keefe is what the evidence told you? But now 24 jurors believe that that one person wasn't responsible. And this batch of 12 didn't even believe a collision occurred at all. So what evidence, pray tell, are you exactly referring to? Is that why you had to continuously evolve the timeline? Why Shannon Balgale had to go back and find additional information and add it to his report at the very last moment? Is that why, instead of looking at 12:31 at the end of it, we're looking back at 12:45? I mean, that was essentially what you were trying to tie her charge to when the jurors were deliberating and they came back with that question of the time frame of when you were trying to allege Karen Read was drinking and driving. You said it was always 12:45. Well, what about 12:31? What about the clocks drifting and drafting? And the bites biting and bitsing and bopsing and boopsing? The campaign of intimidation and abuse. And here we go, folks, as if that wasn't enough. I mean, you essentially encompassed, like, yes, this is a statement. Now I'm the mouthpiece for the McAlberts. Because they've done enough damage with that piss-poor interview that they just gave with Matt Gutman the other day. If you want to check that one out and hear my opinions on that, you can click on the video below. But now he's just clearly gunning for it, right? The campaign of intimidation and abuse that has been waged, funded, and promoted in the public and on the social media is the antithesis of justice. The antithesis, I swear. If this type of conduct becomes commonplace, it will threaten the integrity of our judicial system, affecting both victims and criminally accused. Well, I mean, let's just talk about harassment for 1 second there, hanky-panky. What about the fact that Chris Albert, a witness in this case, threatened to beat Turtle Boy, a journalist who made no prior veiled threats or anything, not even remotely insinuated any sort of violence towards this man, or anyone for that matter. And yet, Chris Albert went so far as to say, I'd beat your face up and down the sidewalk. I would, and I could. Or, possibly, I would if I could. Sounds a little bit like threatening and intimidating behavior to me.
Justice for Peter Berger. You'll beat my face.
I wouldn't. I could. 2 seconds.
Justice for Peter Berger.
Up and down the sidewalk. 2 seconds.
You'll beat my face.
I wouldn't. I could.
But he sounds really intimidating, doesn't he? Somebody who's really afraid of the harassment his family has endured. I'll link that article in my description box below. And I find it absolutely ironic, really, in the most Alanis Morissette style possible. Because if you really felt that scared and intimidated, because these are the same people who have filed witness intimidation charges against Turtle Boy, and have been absolutely, in my opinion, manipulating the judicial system and the law to indict him on charges for things that he didn't do. But if you really felt that afraid of not only just people like Turtle Boy, but people like me, right? People of the public who support Karen Read's freedom and are seeking for the real truth of what happened to Officer John O'Keefe in those early morning hours of January 29, 2022. Why would you put yourself front and center on national television, on one of the biggest television networks in the world, for a sit-down interview where you're sharing your truth? Wouldn't that just open you up for more public scrutiny? Put yourself in a more vulnerable position? Now, I don't know, it's just me, but if I felt afraid or intimidated or harassed and was afraid of continuously getting harassed, I probably wouldn't put myself on a public platform. But again, that's just me. That's just my opinion. But speaking about real threatening behavior, what about people with social media influence who are going online and tweeting and twatting and Twitter twattering at some of the jurors who performed a civic duty and came to the same conclusion that, again, 99.9% of the human population has already come to regarding this case, coming back with a verdict that they didn't agree with, and posing threats to that juror's family, their children. What about that? What would you call that, Hank? Do you defend people like that? Do you encourage that kind of behavior? I'm not saying that you do, but do you speak on behalf of the jurors in juror intimidation? And speaking about juror intimidation, why exactly was Urine Bukwacki chilling in the hallways of the courthouse while the jurors were deliberating? This was well after his testimony, and he had no reason to be there. And I'm assuming he was getting paid for it, for his time being there. We also saw Tully chilling on the sidewalk. Why was he there? He had no need to be there. He wasn't even called as a witness. What about the jurors who signed affidavits last year after the mistrial was declared, sharing that they felt uncomfortable with Brian Higgins, and by Brian Higgins they meant the other thick neck, Brian Albert, for staring at them during closing arguments? What would you call that behavior, Hanklin? What about the fact that Lucky Loughran, the snowplow driver, who has been extremely consistent in his testimony throughout both trials about not seeing a body at 34 Fairview, both times he passed the Albert residence. What about his testimony when he was asked, grilled by you, any intimidation that he might have felt by a blogger, Turtle Boy? And he stated openly, no, he never felt intimidated by any blogger. He never felt any harassment for telling his story. In fact, he was hardly on social media anyways because he was suffering the loss of his late wife, who you showed absolutely no compassion for and completely disregarded that rather quickly and continued on your ridiculous line of questioning. What about Kelly Beaver, the rookie Boston PD cop, who was originally the Canton PD cop that was chilling in, I'm assuming, the control room or dispatch room when she had a false memory of Higgity Diggity and Berkaditz hanging out in the Sally Port, and was called in for a private chat with the Boston Police Commissioner without the presence of a union rep or an attorney or any senior officer to support her. A female, alone with a male superior, by herself, and was told to do the right thing. After she had already told the FBI what she had seen in the Sally Port, about them being in there for a wildly long time. Remember that testimony? What would you call that, Hanklin? Sounds pretty intimidating to me. And what about all the threats that Karen Reed has received when she's supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. And not once but twice was found not guilty for the crimes that she was alleged to have committed. What about that? What about protecting the harassment and intimidation and threatening behavior of a defendant? What then? He goes on to say, we cannot condone witness abuse, causing participants to worry for their own safety or that of their families. But again, if the Alberts and the McCabe's were really afraid for their own safety, why would you put yourself on national television giving candid interviews to share your truth? Because it's your truth about what happened. It's just putting yourself in a more vulnerable position up for public scrutiny. And their families will be left alone. The harassment of these innocent victims. So now he goes from calling them witnesses to victims. I mean, that's at least how it reads to me. What are they victims of? What exactly are they victims of? There were also plenty of Karen Reed supporters whose employers were called by what? I believe by Lizzie Proctor, the wife of lead investigator, customer service representative Chocolate Chip Proctor. What would you call that? And family members is deplorable and should never happen again in a case in this Commonwealth. I mean, it sounds oddly similar to the same language used in Meatball's hostage video that was released. So that video I played earlier in the beginning of this video, that was released before Karen Reed even went to trial the first time. I mean, again, talk about tainting a jury pool. When, at the time, the defense's case was heavily focused around third-party culprit as their defense. Being able to create reasonable doubt in witness testimony. But when you have the DA making a public statement like that, where you're essentially telling the people in your community, the people who could potentially be on this jury, that, hey, everything that these witnesses are telling you is truth. Nothing that the defense is going to say about what may have happened and any misstatements that might have been made by any of these witnesses in this case is true. They deserve a fair trial. Remember when he said that? They deserve a fair trial. Not Karen Reed. And if you recall, Hank Breenan constantly taking the position of, when he was first making his appearance as the special probiotic in the season, of, oh, it's my mission to give Karen Reed a fair trial. But that quickly turned into, the Commonwealth deserves a fair trial. Make of that what you will. My heartfelt condolences to the O'Keefe family and faith that over the coming years they will find peace and closure. And that also sounds so final, like they're going to stop fighting for justice for John O'Keefe. And that's it. There's nothing else to do. Hopefully they just get over it and move on. Which is sad because in a lot of ways, I said this on Andrew Myers, is I don't think that justice for John O'Keefe will ever 100% come unless the O'Keefe family wants answers, right? And starts pressing the DA's office or maybe even hires their own private investigator to dig for the truth. And maybe that will come in time. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's completely up to them and what they want to do. You know, John was their brother, their son, their uncle, right? And however they need to find closure and peace on it is ultimately up to them. But I also find it interesting how all of these other statements are coming out before the O'Keeffes have even made a statement. I mean, I did expect Meatball to come out with his statement, and I expected the special probiotic to also come out with the statement as well too, but certainly not the McAlberts before the O'Keeffes. I mean, talk about not reading the room. And notice how none of that statement, or hardly any of it, was focused around John O'Keefe. It was just the blame game of, oh, it's the jurors' fault. It's, you know, the media attention that this case has garnered. Well, if you look at mainstream media, like the likes of Blowout Barbie, there's a lot of misinformation that was being spread. And people like Turtle Boy, independent journalists like that, Jessica Machado, and other content creators like LTL Media, Microdots, so many others that have had to come forward and speak the truth and share the actual facts of the matter and present them to their audiences, is because the mainstream media wasn't doing the same thing, and the mainstream media upholds that responsibility. Now, programs like Court TV lose their credibility with any case that they report on going forward, no matter what remedy you try to make of it. Having Vinnie Politan, you know, honestly, I think he did a much better job, especially towards the end on his reporting. But there are so many other journalists who have these platforms, who are supposed to be sharing the facts with the public. The public wants transparency. The public wants to know what's going on. How can you explain what's going on to me in a way that I can understand without all the legal mumbo jumbo? How can you dumb it down for the average person so that we can learn? So now I want to play this clip from Blowout Barbie's segment on Court TV earlier today. I try not to give her the views. She actually has me blocked on Twitter, despite me never interacting with her in a day in my life. This particularly angered me because she's somebody who has the responsibility to inform the public accurately. And I feel like, in my opinion, I don't know how true or not true this is, she might actually believe everything that she's spewing out of her gob. I don't know. But I think Court TV, again, in my opinion, has intentionally created the dynamic of Julie Grant's coverage of this case versus Vinnie Politan's. Julie Grant with a contrarian perspective, specifically for views. Specifically to garner more views. Drive up engagement, rage engagement, because actually a lot of times rage engagement will help your video content go viral. It's a marketing tactic as old as time. And while I don't agree with it when you're supposed to be a reputable program and platform, network like Court TV is, where you're supposed to generally take the unbiased approach, especially as somebody who I believe she's a former prosecutor, which is absolutely terrifying. It just, again, it makes everything that you cover after this case difficult for the average person to find credible. How do I know you're reporting the facts? Now I have to do my own homework. I can't trust what you say anymore.
Attorney and crusader for justice. He deserves to be highly commended for his courage and the masterful job he did seeking justice for John O'Keefe. Let's bring in...
I mean, but he just stated that he wasn't able to get justice for John O'Keefe in his own deluded sense. And a crusader of what? His entire defense practice, from my understanding, has been focused around going against corrupted governments, corrupted government agencies, and law enforcement. How is he going to possibly bounce back from this when he was defending the exact institution he spent his career and focused his law firm, his law practice around fighting against? And he didn't do this for free, honey. He was getting paid pretty good at the end, and I would love to know how much money he made after all of this, because we know he blew that cap right out the water.
Our power panel to get some reaction to Hank Breenan's statement. I want to welcome in John DePietro. He covered the show start to finish. He's a nationally known radio host and the creator of Road Patrol Live. Also,
I mean, I don't know how many people, unless you've been following this case, how many people actually knew who John DePietro Dish is. And I don't typically like to bash other creators, but after the disgusting remarks that have been tweeted out, and he's reported on his show about Juror 11 being a immigrant from Brazil, when we live in a country that's supposed to be a melting pot, where we're supposed to encourage the immigration of people, smart-minded people from various cultures and countries to contribute and add to our society. I mean, you just took us back like 100 years with some of those grotesque comments that you made on your show. And also of note, not once will she point out or ask him about him cracking the taillight of a Texas Free Karen Reed supporter. Verdict day. Verdict day. Refusing to exchange his insurance with her. I don't know if there's been any update in regards to that. I know more videos have come out from that exchange with the Free Karen Reed supporter. Whether or not he's taken responsibility for doing that, but I did post a video on my Verdict Day video covering that. And everything that comes out of his mouth, generally speaking, also cannot be taken seriously.
So we've got former prosecuting attorney Tommy Pope, famously put away Susan Smith. He's in the private sector now, also a state lawmaker in South Carolina. And we have high-profile criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Mario Gallucci with us from New York. Good morning to you.
This guy in the corner is a freaking clown and a half, too. They were when they were, I think it was on Verdict Day or one of the Verdict Watch days, where Julie Grant was like, oh, do you think that Karen Reed's going to get cuffed with John O'Keefe's handcuffs in court? Like, it's just so, like what a panel of absolute goons. And the fact that, here's another prosecutor and here's a former prosecutor and now defense attorney, like, these are the bright minds. This guy's a lawmaker too in South Carolina. That's equally as terrifying considering some of the takes he had, which we're about to go through.
All. Let's get your reactions, please, to Hank Breenan's statement. I just want to kind of go around the room here and get your thoughts on what he had to say after this verdict. John, let me begin with you, please.
Julie, and obviously that's the first time I'm seeing it. Everyone else is seeing it. I'm very glad he put it out. He did as good a job as anyone could, do. I'm glad he talked about the exhaustive efforts he went to, that he felt it all led to one person. But this also comes back to...
I mean, he also made it humanly possible for Karen Reed to defend herself and get a fair trial like he promised. He tried to exclude every single expert witness that the defense was trying to call. Trying to exclude the mention of the FBI, which I know Lally also did in season 1. But how is that possibly hiding the facts of the case? How is that possibly giving Karen Reed, again, who was presumed innocent until found guilty, a fair trial?
I'm glad he also touched on how these witnesses, and they're coming under fire, and anyone that's talking and speaking out is coming under fire. And I also want to caution people right now, there are people, it's very dangerous rhetoric that's out there of we have to search for the real killers. And I know we're going to talk about that juror interview that Vinny did. And I find...
What about the juror interview or the fake one that you got catfished? What about the fake juror interview that you published where you got catfished by somebody pretending to be a deliberating juror? Oh, Lord.
Actually, a lot of things she's saying very troubling, where she keeps bringing it back to the house. And she's mentioning, Nicole Albert and Brian Albert. And we need to find out what... this is all dangerous rhetoric. Hank Breenan put together a solid case. He actually, to me, proved his case. We even have the juror saying, I think she touched him, which to me is the new spin of Karen saying, I didn't hit him. Now you have a juror saying, I think she may have touched him, but not hit him. That was...
I think you're misunderstanding what was actually said, John DePetri Dish. I believe what she actually meant by that statement, and what some of the other jurors had stated as well too, is they were trying to consider all the realms of possibilities and trying to see, well, does the evidence support that? And based on what was presented in front of us by the Commonwealth, none of those scenarios make sense. In fact, Juror 11 went on to say that she believes that John was in the house. There's no evidence that we know of that was allowed in season 1 or season 2, only the FBI. The FBI, I believe, knows the real answers to a lot of this. And even still, they're probably, I believe, the investigation isn't closed. Because the fact that you have to continuously mention publicly and make statements in a public forum that the federal investigation is closed, I don't believe it actually is. And just because it's closed doesn't mean it can't be reopened or further investigated, or maybe it ties in to something else. Perhaps the Sandra Birchmore case, which we're going to be covering more extensively on this channel as more news and updates comes out and develops in regards to that. But yeah, I think they were just trying to say, well, exactly what Hank Breenan admitted in closing arguments is nobody actually knows what happens. Nobody actually knows, so therefore anything could be possible. Maybe Karen Reed's SUV was launched into outer space. Who knows?
It must be very difficult. Hank Breenan, it should be head held high. He knew what was on, what was at stake here. And I think people really need to just finally really understand there's a lot at stake here, the way this whole thing went down and how the other side, the Karen Reed side, is actually reacting, celebrating, and just their general demeanor right now. It's very, very damaging and to the system.
Mm-hmm. Right, John.
How is that damaging to the system? We're celebrating a woman who is factually innocent and has been acquitted for what I believe a crime she was framed for doing. Of course, that's something to celebrate. That's something to celebrate when the judicial system gets it right. That is something to celebrate. Because that does mean that we're one step closer to maybe finding out the truth, maybe getting justice for John O'Keefe. I don't know how any of you can look at this and say, yeah, this investigation was great. It was the exact investigation that this Boston police officer deserved. In what world are you living in where you could possibly believe that? And either you're that deluded, or you're purposely taking a contrarian viewpoint for engagement. And you all want to call us the grifters. And that's fine. But at least I believe in something. At least I believe in what I'm talking about. If I believe Karen Reed unalive John O'Keefe, I would be saying that. If the evidence at any point during both season 1 and 2 ever convinced me that she had done it, my content would have pivoted to support that viewpoint. I would not donate my own money to a defense fund unless I believed in that cause. But hey, maybe you do actually believe what you're saying.
Hank Breenan, I've said it before, I'll say it again. He's a hero. He's a hero for those victims. He fought the good fight. It's not easy to do what he did.
But again, notice how she says for those victims. Like, the only victim, if you want to play it like that, the only victim, technically then, would be John O'Keefe. You know? The guy who was unalived, who was left for dead on the front yard of a first responder's house. The man passed out in the snow. Now, in my eyes, there's two victims. Karen Reed. Karen Reed is a victim of the Norfolk DA's office. She's a victim in her own right. But the McAlberts?
He's a hero for those victims. He fought the good fight. It's not easy to do what he did. And John, I'm glad you mentioned juror number 11 speaking with Court TV. She spoke with Vinnie Politan the other night. Let's take a listen to some of what she said about the taillight evidence.
The theory I have, like, if she back up and maybe hit something, a curb or him, or some people in the jury raised the question, maybe he was mad and he could have thrown the glass on the tail light and break it. 34 Fairview and the police department is very close. It was time enough for someone to just show up and drop a piece of tail light at the scene.
What did you think of the...
Okay, so that just was a little bit of a clip of it. Tommy Pope, let me go to you next.
I mean, Julie, how come you aren't interviewing any of the jurors? Like, why instead of blaming the jury for getting it wrong, why don't you ask them why they came to the conclusion they came to? Why don't you try and ask questions and understand why they believe Karen Reed didn't collide her 6,000-pound vehicle into John O'Keefe? Why don't you ask them? Why don't you ask them questions?
Next, please. Your reaction to Hank Breenan's statement, please.
I thought Hank was spot on. I think it was a slip of the tongue, Julie, but when you had introduced John, you said he covered the show from beginning to end, and that's what it was. And I think what concerns me, I mean, we see this in high-profile cases, but it normally takes place outside the courtroom. This somehow invaded the courtroom, and I mean, I think Hank was spot on. You've got to respect the jury and their decision making because we're all part of the system, and if we quit respecting the jury, the system fails. So he's spot on with that. But I like what he went on to say, because I really think it's terrifying that you can orchestrate and get these crowds out front, because the fact that the jurors started with the, because they never really hit the conspiracy thing like they did the first trial. But the fact that that juror just said, well, somebody from the police station could have brought it over there, that tells me she's hearing the rhetoric that has been ginned up outside the courtroom. I'm not saying
That's not what she's saying at all. That's not at all what she's saying. She's saying that based on the case that the defense put together and put forth for them, that's what they thought. Or at least what she thought. It could have been possible. Look at Nicholas Barros' testimony alone. The fact that he had said, and you could see it clear as day on that Ring camera video footage of Karen Reed's SUV getting towed away from Dighton and hauled off to the Canton Sally Port. Him saying that taillight was cracked. Not broken into a million different pieces. The fact that 47 pieces of taillight seemingly didn't reveal themselves until days later. The fact that Choco Chip Proctor didn't think it was important to visit the scene of the crime the day that John O'Keefe was found. But he just naturally assumed, well, it had to have been Karen Reed. And that dang taillight that must have done it. Again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put 2 and 2 together and say, well, hey, this looks shady. Witnesses aren't getting interviewed for months at a time, sometimes a year. After the fact. Some might say key witnesses to this case. Names not being spelled correctly in certain reports, evidence not being logged or stored properly. So yeah, I think it is believable that the shady mother ducker, who Hank Breenan didn't even want to put on the stand, who has since been fired, it's easy, in my opinion, for someone to believe that this is possible.
During the trial necessarily, but somehow it just surprises me you would find that independently. If that's the case, then she believes everybody in every case, they ginned up the speeding charge, they ginned up everything. And so it's this verdict, I respect it too, but it's sickening. And the little signals and the smiles and the laughs. A man is dead. And I'm pretty sure this drunk lady caused it. Whether she did it intentionally or not, she did it. But now she's going to end up being a social media star or a reality star, and a family's left to suffer. So I'm with you, Julie. God bless the family going through another trial. But, the burden's different in a civil case.
But what do you make of Brian Albert, a first responder, not running outside in his underpants, like Captain Underpants, outside to help a fellow officer who was allegedly freezing to death, dying there, left for dead, who would know how to do, I don't know, chest compressions, and probably know how to help somebody in a desperate situation like that better than the likes of Jen McCabe, Gary Roberts, and Garen Reed combined. Because he's got on-site trained experience, years, decades of experience doing that very thing. But because, I'm not a Canton cop, I'm just a Boston cop, I can't be bothered. And forget that for a second. But if you really cared about him, officer to officer, wouldn't you want to help regardless? Even as just another human being. Wouldn't your instinct, if this was somebody you invited into your home, whether he was inside the house allegedly or not, wouldn't you want to see what the heck is going on? What could you do to make sure he was okay? Maybe, I don't know, try and bring him in the house to warm him up? Just a thought.
I mean, just the video we're seeing now. I mean, it's ridiculous, but they won, so they get the benefit of enjoying it.
Tommy, I love your analysis. Especially appreciate the part where you said this campaign invaded the courtroom. You know, we talk a lot about the circus outside, the charade, you know, how that can't affect what goes on in the jury process. And there's a big question. I'm in agreement with you, Tommy. A big question as to whether this jury was tainted, whether that pool was tainted from the outset because of what's gone on in this community.
What was tainted? I can't stand this woman. I cannot stand her. What about all those people who were justice for John O'Keefe, justice for JJ? Where were any of those people at the courthouse? They could have come. It's a free country. They could have come. They could have shown their support, expressed their opinions. There were more people there last year than there were this year, from what I've seen. Where were all those people? That's right, because they're only loud. The quiet majority is only loud behind troll accounts on the Twitter X's or in Facebook groups. But the loud minority, would they just show up in droves? Well, where were you? I mean, why was Vinnie Politan the one who was at the courthouse, Julie? Why weren't you there? If you really believe in justice for John O'Keefe, where were you? Why are you just sitting super cozy in your little court TV studio? You've got the means, I'm sure, to travel. I don't know where you're coming from. But to travel, to go out there to Dedham, maybe talk to some of the people that you disagree with, to understand their perspective, and maybe say, hey, why do you believe, like Vinny did, why do you believe Karen Reed is framed? Why do you think she's being wrongly prosecuted? I didn't see you there.
Mario Gallucci, last but certainly not least here on our power panel. Want to get your reaction to Hank Breenan's statement and your thoughts, please.
So I agree with everybody on the panel. This is typical gaslighting. You brought this up last week in your opening statement, and this is going on more and more in these high-profile cases. The use of social media is increased. The fact that we are now having to address social media, it's going right into what I do for jury selection now. I address social media right from the get-go, just to make sure that, you know, this doesn't interfere in the courtroom. I've tried cases that I've won that I was like, wow, what trial with this jury watching? And I've tried cases that I've lost and said the same thing. So you got to stand by the verdict. But, you know, more and more social media is playing a large, large role of what's going on in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm. But again, the mainstream media, because you want to talk about the social media, well, Court TV is on the social media. What do you call this? This is social media. The mainstream media posts and covers cases as much as content creators and people who of the public who want to just share their opinion. How is that any different? And the mainstream media, as I've stated before, for the most part, has been incredibly irresponsible with delivering factual information of the case. Julie Grant, for instance, you want to talk about gaslighting and lying, stated that as a fact in one of her segments that Karen Reed and John O'Keefe were fighting in the car before he got out of the car, and Karen Reed allegedly mowed him down going 24 miles in reverse for over 80 feet now. Where in the duck are you getting that? When has that ever been stated or entered in as evidence? That as a proven fact that they were fighting. What about the fact that for 2 years, it was reported on multiple networks, I believe, that there was ring camera footage of Karen Reed hitting John O'Keefe. And instead of taking down that information like responsible people of the media, that information was kept online for people to read about, to see about, to hear about, when in fact, that ring camera footage doesn't even exist. In fact, didn't Paul Bunyan say on the stand that Kelleher, the then, lieutenant sergeant or whatever, chief numbnuts of Canton PD at the time, didn't even have ring. He had Allo or some other surveillance camera. And either way, it didn't record. It just happened to not record that night. What about that? Who took accountability for those lies? Certainly not the prosecution, and certainly not the media. Certainly not the media. So you want to talk about the social medias? I mean, it's people like this where I'm like, you're from New York. You just give us a bad name.
All right, Mario, I'm sure Hank Breenan knows that he's such a seasoned trial attorney, as you all know. He's a defense attorney, a high-profile defense attorney. Represented Whitey Bulger. He's had a great career.
Whitey Bulger, who is an unaliver. Again, and it's like, I don't care who he's represented in the past or hasn't. That doesn't matter to me. That doesn't matter to me. But people are always like, Alan Jackson represented Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein. Well, he also helped put away Phil Spector. He was also a prosecutor for a very long time. I don't think Hanklin was ever a prosector. Outside of this special opportunity that he was gifted by D.A. Morrissey for how many hundreds of thousands of dollars? So, at the expense of taxpayers. But yeah, he's a crusader, a real fighter for justice. Now he's gonna go crawl back into defending other mob goons, and that's fine, that's his business. Or goons like the McAlberts, and that's his business, but to shower him in these compliments and accolades of, he's a hero of the people. I mean, it's just, it's ridiculous.
Did this willingly, doing what's right, to seek justice. I'm sure he knows, like you said, every trial attorney knows sometimes you lose cases, you should win. And you win cases, you should lose. It's just the way it goes. You gentlemen know that. And in my view, this is a case that should have been won by the Commonwealth. I believe Hank Breenan proved it, not just beyond a reasonable doubt, but beyond all doubt. I don't know where we ever have seen a homicide prosecution where it's proved down to the minute when the event happened. He proved down to the minute, 12:32 a.m. That was remarkable.
12:32, but that's not even the correct time, Julie. Down to the minute. It was 12:31 and some change. You can't even get the timeline right. What the heck is the timeline telling you here? I mean, it's just like, I feel like she's purposely taking a contrarian perspective just to get rage engagement. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she actually believes this stuff. But either way, it's harmful for the public because they're not receiving accurate information. And now I can't imagine if you are a juror in a case that she potentially covers in the future, feeling comfortable enough to speak to her, let alone any correspondent on court TV. I know I wouldn't. It's like, how can I even trust that what you're going to ask, you're going to twist and turn and make fun, and all those comments you would make of Karen and her facial expressions and what she would wear to court? Are you kidding me, Julie? And it's fine and fair to have an opinion about not agreeing with the outcome of the case, but when you're gaslighting the public, as somebody who is a person of the media, and you have a responsibility, in my opinion, to deliver professionalism and a sensitivity around providing accurate information, not just salacious mumbo-jumbo jargon about, oh, the pink people invaded the courtroom. Well, if you listen to any of these jurors, they all said the same thing. We knew it was a high-profile case. And yeah, that already comes with its own load of pressure. And at the end of the day, the DA didn't have to re-prosecute her, especially on the same charges when she was acquitted of those from season 1. The Commonwealth, if you really felt like, oh, the jury pool was tainted, they could have requested a change of venue if they felt like they weren't going to get a fair trial in Norfolk County. And don't even get me started on Bias Bev. That Beverly canola oil. She's probably living her best life now down at the Cape. God bless that woman. God bless her. But that's the other thing. They could have requested a change of venue. Why do you think they didn't do that? Because that would look really bad for the Commonwealth to request the change of venue because they don't believe that they could get a fair trial. How backwards is that? Usually it's the other way around. But I digress. This stuff gets me really, really fired up. Especially when it comes to dragging people of the jury who didn't ask to be on the jury. They're just doing their duty as citizens. And the way that some of them have been just disgustingly dragged on the internet, accused of disgusting things. It's shameful. It's disturbing. And to platform those people, Court TV, you need to do better. You need to do better. Stop giving people like that a platform. If you want to be seen as a credible network and a place for the people to receive the news in regards to what's going on in our country, I mean, I believe in complete transparency when it comes to the judicial system. I believe every trial should be aired. People deserve to know what's going on in their communities. That's how we learn from it. That's how we learn the law and how it applies in certain situations. They don't teach that stuff in school unless you're pursuing a law degree, which is sad. And that's a whole other conversation for a whole other day. But with that being said, if you enjoyed today's content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you do not miss the next video from me. And I would love to know, too, I got an email, Lexus Roommate with 1M at gmail.com. what other cases are getting you fired up? I'm going to continue to cover the aftermath of the Karen Reed case, because I'm sure there's going to be more and more that develops, especially with the civil case, as well as the Sandra Birchmore, as more developments come through regarding that. But if there are other cases that are getting you equally as fired up, I want to hear about it. So you can email me with your case suggestions. And if you are a channel member, then I will put those case suggestions right to the tippity top of my list of things to take a look at. I'm going to be making a special announcement next week about the future of the channel. So stay tuned for that. It's all good stuff, not bad stuff, so don't get worried here, folks. All the same Alexasrewm content that you have loved over the past year is just going to get even better. Hopefully, you think that. But it'll just mean you get even more from me and more consistently. So I will have an update for you next week regarding that. But got my monthly YouTube AdSense payment today. So we will be making a 20% contribution to the Karen Reed Defense Fund. I believe it's still up. Let me see, because she still got plenty to pay for. Just because she's been acquitted doesn't mean that she still doesn't need any help that she can get. Yep, you can still don't. I mean, it's over $1 million now. It's flipping fantastic just to share. So I'll be making our monthly contribution there. The way we usually do it is whatever we earn on this channel, I take 20% of those earnings and donate it to the cause that this channel believes in. And, you know, this has been dedicated to the freeing of Karen Reed. And again, she's still going to need our help. And, you know, hopefully over time, this will help her, you know, just completely be able to break away and move forward with her life in a positive way. But if you want to make your own contribution, you could do so by following the link in my description box if you want to. Not obligated to, but if you want to, you can. So that being said, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next titillating edition.